Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you're calling us from. Welcome to the May OpenNTF webinar. Today we're going to cover some of the popular OpenNTF projects, and we even have a new one, which hopefully will get popular. So our agenda is we have Jesse Gallagher is going to kick it off, talking about two projects, NSF ODP tooling and Domino API. And then Devin Olson will cover enhanced log. And then Andi Kress will cover the new project I was talking about called Open Workspace. And Karsten will cover a cool TodoManager. And at the end, we'll have questions and answers. So we'll save all the questions until the end. I just wanted to point out, I'm sure many of you are aware and have signed up already, the Domino V12 launch. It's going to kick off on June 7th. And then after that, they're going to have 12 days of short webinars, virtual events, talking about individual components of the Domino V12 launch. So please sign up, and it should be interesting. Looks like it's going to be a great set of products. I'd like to thank our two sponsors. We have HCL, who's been a very big supporter of the OpenNTF organization, and Prominic, who donates everything IT related, as well as admin support. So thank you to both HCL and Prominic for all your support. We do appreciate it. Remember, OpenNTF is a volunteer community. We got lots of little tasks and projects, or you can, aside from creating your own project, we got projects that could use some help. We got our own site design and things like that that could use development, testing. Whatever skill you have is fine. You don't have to be a developer. Even testing and helping out organize stuff is great. Just let us know. We do have a Slack channel on OpenNTF. That's slack.com, I think it is. So if you want to help, just pop in there. And even if you don't have time to help, just pop in there anyway. We'd love to have you join the community. June, obviously June is a big month because V12 is going to announce. So we're going to kick off our June webinar with Daniel Nashid talking about the Domino V12 Certification Manager, which is all new. It's, for all the you admins and other people who have done the OpenSSL and the KYR tool and moving the files around. And that's all going away. It's going to be a nice, easy to deploy system for certificates. And there's also some new ciphers that's going to enhance your security. That'll be part of V12, not necessarily part of the Certification Manager, but just rolled out as part of V12 as well. Daniel's going to talk about that. So the link to sign up is up there. It's also on the OpenNTF website on the webinars page. So please plan on attending. And the first question that we always get, is this going to be recorded? Yes, we always record all our webinars, and these are on our YouTube channel, and there's a link to that on our webinars page. So you can go there and see links to all the individual webinars that we've hosted. Asking questions, other than will this be recorded, there's a questions pane in your GoToWebinar interface. Please use that to ask your questions. And at the end of all the presenters, we'll go through your questions verbally. So we're not going to actually answer the questions in the questions pane, but please ask them there. This way, the questions and the answers will be recorded as part of the YouTube recording that we have. So please keep your questions related to these projects that we're talking about today. If you have any other questions, feel free to post it on the Slack channel. So first up, we have Jesse. I'm going to make you the presenter.
All right. So Howard mentioned that I'll be talking about two projects, but after the point where he created those slides, I added 3 more into my deck because I could, but they'll be short ones at the end. But to begin with, I'll mention a little bit about the OpenNTF Domino API. It's a venerable project at this point. And Really, this is very similar to the slide on this last year, which is still chugging along. So, the OpenNTF Domino API, it does what it's supposed to. At some point shortly, I'll have a release for 11.01 finally that has large summary fields. In general, the API does what it does. With V12, I think I'll be adding a couple more things to that. And that's really the way that it progresses at this point. Every once in a while I'll go in and find some bugs or enhancements, but for the most part, it's keeping pace with the newer stuff from notes.jar as it trickles in. So, it's still a major infrastructural project. I use it heavily in my main client work, but it's also not a particularly fast-moving project at this point. Releases will work for multiple releases unless there's some kind of discontinuity, like back when we moved to Java 8, for example. So moving on to kind of what's essentially my more or less flagship project at this point, which is the NSF ODP tooling. So this is one, again, about a year ago, I gave a brief overview, and I'll do that again here, trimmed down a little bit. So if you did attend the previous webinar or any of my previous talks on it, it won't be too much overindulgence on this. But this is my project that handles going from an on-disk project to an NSF, back somewhat deploying projects, and then improving the experience of editing an ODP outside of designers. So essentially the remit of this project in general is I don't like designer and I don't want to use designer, and so I'm writing this instead. So it allows you to take an on-disk project, so the kind that you would export with team development in designer, and then you can compile it using Maven into an NSF without designer involved at all. You can use a local notes runtime. So for example, I do my development on a Mac, and I have the Mac Notes client installed, and that will handle the compilation for me. You can also target a remote Domino server. So this can be useful if your local environment is a little wonky, as mine is also sometimes. Or if you want to, you could do your development on Raspberry Pi or something, another platform that does not have a native notes library yet. So this allows you to do all this, and in particular, because it's all happening in Maven and does not require designer or any of the UI automation that previous attempts at this did, it goes smoothly into continuous integration and continuous deployment servers. So for example, I've mentioned this on my blog a couple times, like that's one of the main uses I have for it, which is that I have a large client project. We have a dozen or so NSFs in it, and I have Jenkins running, and it builds all of them as it goes. So it builds our OSGI plugins, it builds our ancillary like NPM-based projects, and then puts them all into NSFs without any developer involvement other than checking in the changes. So this is it is the lifeblood of my workflow at this point. It saves me hours every week. And so that's it's been a tremendous boon for me, at least. Similarly, there's the ODP export. So this is going the other direction. So if you did a project export, a designer, or did the team development sync, that will happen with this process. This is, even if you're already in a large project, this is useful if, for example, you have developers who are not on board with on-disk project use, which is often the case at note shops. You can at least do kind of periodic snapshots of them and say, okay, well, they made changes in the NSF and they didn't tell me, but I can at least do an ODP export. So again, in my client work, I have a script that does exactly this, because we have a guy on the team who has been doing notes development for, we'll say, a long time. And so he is not necessarily on board with doing it properly. So I export databases periodically. So there's deployment. This part's still a little sketchy. This is a very sticky technical problem to get fully right, because the replace design API is not an actual thing that I can make use of, apparently. So this is in there. It gets a little better every once in a while. I have some people who use it a little bit, so it's better than it used to be, but it's a component in the tool set, we'll say. And then there's the IDE support. So this is where you install this into Eclipse, and then it will turn your on-disk project into something that resembles an NSF in Designer. So you have the same sort of classifications. And it importantly will take your XPage side Java code and make it participate in the Eclipse plugin development environment. And so that way, if you do refactors in a bundle, it will change in the it will be able to change in the NSF as well, which is a problem if you're doing an OSGI like an XPage's library, and then you want to use it in Designer. What would happen is you would have to install it in Designer, restart Designer, and then look to see if anything broke. Here, it will automatically handle that across your design elements. It also does some nice autocomplete, which is a fun thing to do. So this will, it has snapshots of the XPage's core tools, and it will also work with your custom controls. So this is something where, if you're typing in an XSP file, so an XPage or custom control, or if you're working in one of the DXL based ones, it uses the XML schema that comes with Domino, which is actually extremely well licensed, and I'm glad they do that. And it will provide autocomplete. So it'll provide a little bit of documentation. It'll tell you what the options are, what it knows, and give you some extra information as you're going. So this is, a step towards not even needing Designer for actual XPage's development. And for all of this, there is in the Eclipse Marketplace, this is available there. I do mention Visual Studio Code. That's a little talking ahead of my turn here. That is something that is technically in the repository, but is not distributed in the marketplace. So I can use it in Visual Studio Code, but it's not really available for anybody else at this point. Now, the main updates since last time. So I've done some good work here, making it so that Maven dependencies are now considered like implicit jars. So for example, if you normally deploy something to JVM libext, you can include it in your Maven project just as a dependency. And then when you build your NSF, that's not included in the NSF, but it is in the class path. So that is to mirror that sort of experience. You can also target a specific ODS level. Say, if you're building on a V11 server, but for some reason you're deploying to V8 or something, and you want to make sure you can say target essentially what it really does is the .NS8 trick. You can set the ACL in the POM, so this is something where in theory you can do this just fine in the on this project itself, but I found that in a lot of cases it's useful to have kind of your canonical ACL when in your project configuration. So that way, if you're messing around with your template, you don't necessarily have to have that always be ready for immediate deployment, like having your bracketed entries and things like that. You can instead say, here is the real ACL, regardless of whatever is in the OnDis project. And I found that to be a nice way to kind of do it more cleanly and not have to worry so much, even though, it works, but it's nice to have that specified a little more. And then one that actually, is another one that came up immediately from client work is web content resources. So we have a project where it's essentially a fully client.js NPM build project that somebody else is working on. And our deployment mechanism is to throw all of those things into an NSF as design elements. So that way we can handle an ACL the same way, like make sure that the login happens at the Domino level, not have to worry about some of those fiddly details. So what happens is I have an NSF that's just a shell, and I say point the web content resources to the build results of that, which are also built as part of the Maven build, and it all comes through. So none of that exists in the ODP by default, but then it's built, the NPM project is built, and then I end up with an NSF with a bunch of design elements. So that all happens nice and smoothly. And then there's been a bunch of fixes. This has also been, particularly the last couple of weeks, I've been doing some more as far as file system fixes, Windows things. There's a lot of edge cases when you're dealing with NSFs, and there's a lot of edge cases when you're dealing with Windows file systems. So I've been doing as much as possible on this. I've blogged about a couple of these things dealing with non-ASCII characters because some people aren't American for some reason, and then working better in Docker and things like that. So there's been a bunch of fixes, and there should be one shortly. I'm actively working on a number of other little things. So for the lightning round of my remaining projects, so the XPage is bizarre. I figured I'd mention because I have been uploading releases. This was originally something that what was once the XPage's team would use to create essentially a sandbox for their projects. I mean, the bundle name is Phil's Extension Library, so that'll give you an idea of its origins. But it does have an XSP interpreter, and so essentially now it exists just for me to harvest that sweet XSP translator as part of the NSF ODP tooling. But it still exists as its own project, and I do upload it periodically. So every once in a while, that'll get a nice little bug fix release. Next one is NSF Router. So this is something that I posted about a couple months ago, and this is it was like a little experiment that I decided to try out, where could I make it so that if you just have a little file in your NSF saying, I want to go from some custom path and redirect over to an XPage or other design element, without having to go to the names.nsf website document, can I do that? And the answer is yes. So this is something that, as far as I can tell, does exactly what it's supposed to do. The way this works is you have a little file in the design of your NSF, and you can handle in NSF routing within that without having to go to nameset NSF each time. So that's a nice little, that's a problem I had for years and years and years, and this scratches that itch. And finally, I want to give a quick nod to the import and export for designer project. So this is an old project that I resurrected recently. So this was from IBM and OpenNTF it was over a decade ago. And this allows you to, in Designer, you can right click on an NSF and say import reusable control from OpenNTF, and it will go to the OpenNTF server, find the registered controls. So custom controls are common in here, forms and views and things like that. It never really applied well when you were dealing with OSGI plugins, so it lost some momentum. All of the controls you see there are live, but the latest ones are from like 2012, so that'll give you an idea. But since we're all going to use LotusScript again, apparently, I figured this would come in handy, so I dusted it off. I made it work in Designer, FP10, and newer. And really now it's just there waiting for people to use it. So at some point I'll probably make a blog post, say, hey, it also allows you to package these things up. Go, please do this, and then we will start having some new life in here to make use of all the the mobile controls and all that sort of thing that people will be doing. So I think that about covers my project. So I will hand the presentation back over to Howard.
Thanks, Jesse. A lot of cool little tools there. And if you're a developer, you should definitely check some of those out. And if you're an admin and didn't understand some of the terminology, thanks, David. Just for those admins, ODP is on this project, which is when we take an NSF and convert it into individual files to then use it with Bitbucket or any other source control tool. So anyway, I'm going to pass that on to Devin. Oops.
Hey.
Don't want to do that. So Devin, I'm going to make you the presenter.
Okay. I'm waiting for the rights to come up. Look at that. I am the presenter. Show my main screen. Oh, beautiful. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about Enhanced Log. It's a project that's been on OpenNTF for well over a decade. Recently, I made some updates to it, and I asked for some name changes because when I put it up years and years and years ago, I made the mistake of putting a version number into the name and screwed things up, and I had to have a name change done. And so we did that, and it completely changed my download count. Don't really care. This is a tool that I hope helps everybody. And basically, it's enhanced logging for LotusScript. For those of you who are of the belief that LotusScript is a dead language, you're wrong. Just brutal. It's going to continue to be used for a long time. The need for enhanced log for those developers came out of this object, the notes log object, the default object built in for logging. And many years ago, I was using this, and I decided that it had a whole lot of needs and enhancements that I wanted to it. And so rather than wait around for, at that time, IBM to ever do anything with this, I just said, that's it, I'm going to build one, and I'm going to enhance this. And so that's what I did. And so that's what that project is. And it's this is from using the enhanced log template. Basically what it does is it allows you to add very enhanced, much deeper level logging to your LotusScript. And the logging is based upon a session. So whatever script that you add this enhanced log capability to, once you start logging, it keeps track of the entire session, the time of the run. So the session is the scope of the program execution, be it a button on a form, be it a LotusScript agent running in your client, be it a LotusScript agent running on a server, being it a web agent called from a web event, and any one of those things. That's the concept of the session. So it tracks who you are, gets all that information about you, and then everything that you send to the log, it logs. It's not that difficult. This tells the various elements from the design template that you would need to copy to your database in order to run it. You configure it through a log config document. This is the config document. You make your choices. You can, in fact, log stack trace information. I make it quite clear. Do it for development and testing only. If you log stack trace information on a server, you will bring the server to its knees. You'll crash it. And the reason why you'll crash it is because in order to log the stack trace information, I'm using a piece of Lotus script code that in the core has a memory leak. And so, oh, Devin, why are you causing a memory leak? No, I'm not. I'm not causing a memory leak. The core code has a memory leak. It's documented. We know about it. I take advantage of it for your local testing. If you want to use it for locally, you can turn it on and you can log the stack trace. Otherwise, don't do it in production because you will kill the server. Plain and simple. But other than that, it does its thing. You get to choose whether or not you're going to log actions. You choose a target database. It has some additional capabilities. It has support for method profiling. So you can profile your methods that you're logging if you choose to do it. And I've got detailed instructions in the source code on how to do it. I'm going to save these changes and the logs. You get a view that looks just like this. So here's a bunch of logs that I ran. I'm running the template comes with a couple of built-in agents to demonstrate it. The code just lives in a script library. So it's a single library. Here's the template. There are many libraries included in the template that you can use for your other things. All of it's Apache licensed, but the enhanced log class library, the one that actually does the workers, is a standalone library. It doesn't depend upon anything. So doesn't depend upon anything. It's completely standalone. And in order to call the methods in here, you simply call the method you want. It uses a singleton model for the main class. And that singleton model has a terminate method. So that means when your code stops running, it finishes logging. So you don't have to remember to finish your logging stuff or to write anything out. It just does it for you. Makes things a whole lot easier to deal with. So I did some tests right before we came on here. So if I kind of look at one of these tests, this is what a log document looks like. You've got the information, where it is, your ID, who the user is, when did it start, how long did it run, what's your ACL level, what are your roles, what version of notes are you running, etc., all that stuff. And then these are the log entries. This is how it does its thing. It just writes everything out that you're doing to the log. It works really well. You can also include doc links. You can include view links. They work when you're running. It's not difficult. You just simply, it's a single code. When you're calling it, you make the call to write the code. You can have crashes. It'll handle it. This is what an exception looks. Let me find an error. There, this is an error. So the code tried to divide by 0, it tells me what it was. I had stack logging turned off. That's why we don't get a stack. If I turn stack logging on, we can get a stack. But again, it will bring a server down. So I recommend against doing that in production. The code to call it, to call a log, is just like this. So here's the agent that logs a lot, or here's the method logs a lot of stuff. This is called by the agent, one of which does to the notes log and one of which does to the main log database. So we got just a bunch of hoop-de-doop-de code in here that you can play with. For those of you who write Lotus script, you know what's going on. That's built for here, but how do I start writing it to the log? Well, it's just like that. A reverse method, like enhanced log action, a prefix logging stuff, enhanced log extended contents, it writes the prefix. It's just that simple. And if we look at the log, right down here, loader script started, that's the prefix, that's how it's logging stuff. So that's exactly how it works. The different types of methods, log action, log method result, log extended content, log warning, log error, those define the font types. So warnings are in this big bolded weird purple, and method results are in this teal, and extended content is in this blue, and all of that is controllable by you doing nothing more than setting your rich text that you want for the log type. So if you want to customize it for your environment, go right ahead. Otherwise, you don't really need to. So that's kind of that, how it does it there. That's the end of that. I'll close that and come over here. I mentioned method profiling. So one of the options you can do when you're method profiling is you can put a line of code at the beginning of each one of your methods and a line of code at the end of each one of your methods, and it will handle tracking all of that. And there's code in there that explains how to do it, but it will profile your agent run for the entire session. And so it finishes, it generates a profiled method summary, and if you open your profiled method summary, like the method summary, there's the beginning. And this is it. This is the extent of the profiled method summary. It's just some XML, so you can parse it or process it or do whatever you want with it to transform your XML, or you can click the magic button and do it yourself and go out and come back in, because I'm too lazy to try and do a UI refresh, stick an attachment on thing. I don't want to deal with that. So I just, boom, there it is. This is the profiled method summary. If we open it up, it just looks like that. So there's the module, the class, the method. Was it a set or a get operation, or was it a standard method call? How many times was it called? How many milliseconds did it run? Did it recurse? If it recursed, how many recursions were there total? And what's the max depth of recursion that was counted to? So this is helpful if you're trying to figure out, why is my agent really, really slow? Well, turn on method profiling, run the agent a few times, come in here and look at it, you've got your data. And then I also mentioned that it will log to your notes log. And so when you decide that you don't want to log it to the regular database, the regular logging database, and you just tell it via code or property setting in the code in your loader script that you just want to write it to the standard notes log. Well, this is a standard notes log file, so it's not a dedicated one, not using any special form. And this is what it looks like. There's normal miscellaneous events in your notes log. This is what an enhanced notes log looks like when it writes. So there's the miscellaneous events. This is the agent that called it. What's the log ID? All of the meta information is included, and then the entire log runs just like in the other system, just like in this built-in, but it writes your notes log. So you've got a simple standard to deal with. And again, when you get an error, it tells you what's going on. So that's kind of it. I didn't put together fancy slides because, well, I didn't have time. So I put a new release out a few days ago. I put a new release out last night. 2 people downloaded it. I caught a bug in it this morning. We've pulled the release. There'll be a clean release with that bug removed within the next day or so. So if you want to use this, please go ahead, go out, tear it up. And if you want to give me suggestions on it, by all means, give me suggestions. And at some point in time, I'll put the source up on my GitHub server and let everybody play with it if people want to dive into it that way. So that's it. Thanks. I'm going to turn this back
Devin.
over. Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate that. Now you just need to write some Java interfaces. For those of us who haven't touched LoaderScript for a couple of years.
Guess what? It's already in the works. I've already done a few tests. I had some help from some developer friends of mine to kind of help me look into making a Java version of this. And we did some testing, we did some playing, we had some successes. And I've got all of that in the works, but I'm not ready to release it until it's actually something I'm ready to put my name on and say, hey, there, go use it. Because I don't like releasing code that is not yet ready for prime time. So there will be a Java version. It's just, I got to get to it.
Oh, great. That's good news to hear. All right, Andi, I think you're up next. I'm going to make you the presenter. And don't forget to unmute yourself. Andi? Okay, not sure what happened to Andi. Oh, wait a minute. He went offline. Tell you, Karsten. Oh, wait a minute. I think we're seeing Andi's screen. We just don't have. Andi, can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. We hear you now.
All right.
See your screen. So we're all set.
All right. So I will show you a new project which we put on OpenNTF a couple of weeks ago. It's called Open Workspace because we made it public available. So we use set framework which we already created internally. So I'm working for a company and we developing Nodes application since 15 years. So we are big in LodoScript, but we also have a running XPages applications, which we try to replace with the new app dev pack with Node at the middleware and with Vue as the front end. So I will start with why we decided to replacing our XPages applications. Basically, it's depending on the work which we want to do with that. So we have a lot of field engineers which are all day long on the road and fixing problems at the customer sites, and they are heavily using data centers where they don't have network connections. So we were looking for an offline functionality, and we don't want to have local replicas of Nodes applications. So we want to have a new modern web application which is working on mobile devices as well. And the benefit is that we maybe from time to time we can replace the Nodes client for field engineers completely and just use it in the back office. What we use is Domino as the backend, but as well, this opens up some new possibilities to maybe include other data services or data storage providers which are out there. We're using IAM client OAuth for the control of who is accessing the system, but I can demo that in a few minutes. So what needs to be done before is we decided to have a completely new tech stack, right? So we're still using Nodes client, so we use the Domino Designer, and we're still using XPages, which we write mainly in Java. We use Visual Studio Code as our editor, and we use an Git server with Git Flow. And the new tech stack is completely different, so it's more automated. And my team is working on their local machines, but we have a completely public demo available, which is always with the next code drop, and we have a production environment with the latest release code. And this is all stored on a repository on GitLab, and we're using, instead of Jenkins, we're using the CI runner, which is an add-on to deploy that to our environment. And as a start, we set that up as containers within Docker, which is making life much more easier to handle that stuff. Yeah, when you download the new project, you will see two folders or two repositories. One is called front end and one we covered with back end, and we split it up our project because I have a team who is just doing front end development. So they are just using Vue and Vuetify, which is an UI framework, to build a front end, and I have a team which is working on the back end side and providing the front end guys with the REST API. We use some cool new features, plugins, which is already out there and it's working. So we're using Workbox to cache all REST calls into the client database, which is called IndexedDB, and this is using a little new feature which is called DEXI, which is adds some cool functions to the IndexedDB, which is quite old. And we're using background sync, so this means user is already getting data from the cache, and we will refresh the cache in the background to get the newest data available to the user. Root means Vue is made for single page applications, and because we have a complex web applications running, so we create routes to make that available as well. And as well, we're using Vuex, which is a state management library for Vue. How to get started? Quite easy. So we have a couple of requirements which you need to have, which is you have to have a Node.js server version 12 or higher running, and you need a valid and functional IAM setup with the Proton task on your Domino backend. If that's the case, download the project, install it with the package manager, and just run the code to start it. And how it looks like you will see now. So I will switch to the browser. So this is the IAM client which should be set up to work. And if you log in, it will okay. Nice demo. My network is lost, so I need to do that again. And just start it again. So this will run both repos. We have implemented a new start script, which is needed to build a service worker. So we're using the service workers, which are available in every modern browser. So this needs a little add-on to use SSL certificates. So building that, which should be done in a few seconds. Everything which you saw on the slides is included in the README file of the project. So the README file is a little bit more, it's like a cookbook where you can also find information about Vue, about Node, about service workers. So all that stuff which should help to get you started on that. Okay, here we go. Let's try it again. looks not bad. I just have to remove my key again. Cookies, remove. Okay, now I'm lost and nervous. Live demo is not working.
Hey, Andy.
Yes.
One of the participants said you might have the wrong port. They said you're maybe 8443 instead of 7443.
Normally this should work.
I'm just passing that on in case that was something different.
But we can, nope. Okay, yeah.
Hey, tell you what, Andy, if you want to spend some time and we'll come back to your demo and go on to Karsten, would that help?
Yeah, maybe just, yes, that would be fine. I will try to get that working again, yeah? Sorry, guys.
That would be fine. We'll give you a few minutes if you'd like to see the finished product. That'd be great. Karsten, we'll go make you the presenter, if that's okay?
Okay.
You should be a presenter now, Karsten.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great, because I just didn't have any screen from Andi. So my topic today is my personal to-do management that I built for myself and published last year after some years on my hard disk. It's based on a theory called 4 quadrants by Stephen Covey. I've got some links to the details and description about this topic on the OpenNTF page, and 2 more links that I find very inspiring and that just brought me to this idea. These are links from lectures of Randy Porsche. He was a professor at Carnegie Mellon University for computer science, and he died in 2008 from pancreatic cancer. And he did 2 lectures. One was called Last Lecture, and then afterwards, after this big success, he did another one, which was about time management, and that lecture covers this technique. Basically, the 4 quadrant theory means that you have a matrix of 4 quadrants, and you need to decide for each topic that you write, that you create in the application, and whether it's important or not important, and whether it's due soon or not due soon. And that's how I structured the application. So it looks like this. It's a pretty simple design because it consists of 4 folders, and here you see this order from 1 to 4, and this is the order that you have to do your work to get the most out of your day. I already created some topics here that you see from last year, some examples. They are overdue, that's why you see an exclamation mark. These topics can be moved between the folders by doing a drag and drop operation. So what you do is you cannot drag to the folder, but you can drag to the number because it's nodes, it's an outline in this case. And that's how you can organize your work and decide which one is the most important one, which topic is the most important one. And on mobile devices, drag and drop does not work yet. That's why you have a context menu where you can move to the different quadrants. Creating a new to-do is pretty simple by clicking the plus icon and just typing a subject due date is not required. Same for start by. And on save, you can decide whether it is Q1, Q2, 3, or 4. So that's my new to do. When I'm done with a topic, I can drag it to the recycle bin, where I can find it, and I can delete it, or I can just restore it by moving it back to the folder. So there it is. This week I did some work on this database to make it compatible with Nodes 12, with some Nodes 12 features that got introduced. These are add formulas that can detect not just like before, if the application is running on a desktop client or a mobile client, but also the dimension of the window, for example, the form that you're currently looking at. And that's why this application does not just look like I presented. You can resize the window, reopen it, and you see if it's not wide enough. Let's see, not try. There it is. This is the narrow design. That's the design that you get automatically on an iPhone. It's the same application, just with a different design optimized for the screen real estate with the same functionality. So you can move tasks between the different folders or to the recycle bin. Was a bit tricky because these add formulas do currently in beta 1 and in beta 2 and 3 not work as expected, at least by me. So you don't always get the right dimension of the window. You get the dimension of the window that was open before, like in that case, my workspace or the view when I open the document. I hope this gets fixed until the final version of Nodes. So I had to do some tricks to get this work. And what you see in this case is a start screen that triggers a timer, and the timer waits 1 second and then does a refresh, and that refresh catches the right dimension, and that's how I do this. So that was my personal use case to test these formulas and to report some bugs in the beta forum. Installation is pretty easy. All is described here in the OpenNTF page. Just copy the template to the server and sign it. Give yourself editor access. There's no fancy access concept yet. No teamwork in this case. So every user would have to get editor rights. But my main topic was personal to-do management, because I had to find some point where I can enter my personal ideas. I tested this application in Nodes in the Nomad clients on mobile devices, in that case iOS, and it even works in the Nomad web client without any changes. So that's all from me. Back to you, Howard.
Okay, thanks, Karsten. That looks pretty cool. And we've got a couple of questions too. Let me, I think Andi is still working on some technical issues, so we'll see if he gets that going. So let's go to Q&A, and give me a second here. So just a reminder, if you want to ask questions, there's a questions pane in the GoToWebinar interface. And I was kind of in a hurry when I started this and failed to introduce my co-host. Probably didn't even introduce myself because I wasn't sure how long my microphone battery would last. So my name's Howard Greenberg, and Graham Akers is my co-host, and he's going to be helping me with the questions. Before we get started, I also had a poll that I forgot about that Graham reminded me on. So while you're getting some questions in there, let me ask a question in the poll, and just to see if any of you use any of the projects we're talking about today. So if you use any of them or all of them, just select the little check boxes, and we'll look at the results in a second.
I personally am kicking myself for not knowing about enhanced log. Devin, I apologize. That is some pretty awesome looking stuff.
Ah, you just made my day. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that is cool. Except I've been written Lotus script for so long. I think I forgot how to do it.
I'm such a big believer in logging and have done my own stuff, although I haven't done nearly to the level that you've done, Devin. But I am looking for opportunities to use that because that is awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
And I did hear from Andi, he had some VPN issues. So we'll see if he gets established before we end our webinar today. But if not, he'll make a video and we'll put it up on the webinars page. Is one of the
he actually just posted, said he's probably 2 minutes out. So we can maybe we can jump into the questions for Jesse and then we'll pivot.
Yeah, let's go from go in order, and we go through Jesse and Devin. When we get to questions for Andi, we'll let him do a quick demo first. So I know one of these is answered in the questions pane, but it is probably.
Do you want to end the poll, Howard?
Oh yeah, thank you.
I guess I could have done that. Sorry.
That would help. And let me share that. Okay, so it looks like about 44% of you. Again, there's multiple options here. So a number of you have used the Domino API. Of course, probably no surprise. It's been a pretty popular project for the last, pretty much since XPages came out, and is a big help to XPages developers. And quite a few of you use the NSF, which I had a typo, NSF ODP tooling. And Devin, you'd be happy to know that some folks use the enhanced log, as well as a few using the TodoManager, Karsten.
That makes me very happy.
And of course, with Open Workspace being new, I'm sure not too many people have implemented that. That looks pretty cool, though. All right, so let's go back to the questions. And Jesse, there was a question. I know you answered it, but I think it's a good one. So the ODP tooling, can you automatically create an NSF from a Git repository?
So depends. If the NSF, the ODP in the Git repository is already wrapped in a Maven project, as all mine are, then yes, you're good to go. Otherwise, at the very least, you would need a small pom.xml, so that's the Maven project file. You need one of those. In the NSF ODP repository is an examples directory that shows a single NSF. You can generally start from that. There's also an example that shows a multi project build where you have an OSGI dependency. So if you had to include an update site as well, that will provide an example. So if you just have a Git repository that has an ODP in it and nothing else, you would just need to add a pom.xml with some basic information in it. And then you wouldn't have to customize the ODP beyond that.
Jesse, is that question or is that answer based on opening the NSF in your Java client or in Domino Designer?
So this is if you have an ODP in, like say you clone a Git repository that has an ODP in it, then you would build it with Maven, which you could do from the command line or by creating the project and importing it in Eclipse and running it there. So after that, you would have in your target directory a NSF file, which with which you could do what you would like.
Right. The reason I may bring it up is I remember seeing an old Notes in 9 video that David did where he created an ODP and was able to import it into Domino Designer and actually work on it inside of Domino Designer.
Yeah, well, so that's where the where in Eclipse with the extra tooling that I have for Eclipse specifically, if you import one of these Mavenized ODPs, that gives you the extra fancy stuff and lets you work with the files and that stuff in Eclipse.
Okay. The next question is, does the ODP tooling depend on the OpenNTF Domino API?
It does not, and in fact, it specifically doesn't have any dependencies other than the bazaar. That's because when you're running it on a server, it actually installs the other third-party OSGI plugins you have, so I didn't want to step on any toes there. So it does not have any dependencies that are not provided in it, and it's pretty light as far as what it uses.
Jesse,
Okay.
when you said no dependencies other than the bazaar, my brain translated B-I-Z-Z-A-R-E instead of B-A-Z-Z-A-R. And I'm sitting here laughing.
It is a
trying to
good
figure out
project
what
name
you
in that way.
Hey, Jesse, does ODP tooling require any minimum version of Domino?
Yeah, so it needs 901 FP10 at the earliest. It's all Java 8 stuff and expects that your server knows that it's running Java 8. So that's the cutoff. As far as I know, it should still work on that version. I mean, admittedly, I have not used it in a good long time, but I haven't added anything that is explicit to newer versions.
Okay, thanks. And I think this question, what you answered before, the NSF ODP tooling does not need ODA, the Domino API,
Right.
so it does not.
Right.
Andy says he's ready. Should we pivot back over to Andy?
Yeah, that's fine. Then we'll come back, and there's a couple for Devin and Karsten as well. Yeah. And so let me make Andy the presenter. 1 second. Okay, Andy, you should. We see your screen.
You're on mute, Andy.
I unmuted Andy. Oh, maybe we muted him.
Okay.
He's unmuted.
Sorry. So sorry guys. So I lost VPN connections, which is needed for my IAM login. So I'm back online, and what you see on the left is the open workspace. So it's kind of a simple navigation where we have on the left side a menu bar where we just add one application, and that application is the Node demo NSF, which comes with the app dev pack. So and on the right side you can see that we use a service worker. So service worker is already running and listening to what we talk to him, and we're using the internal index DB, which is available. And as you can see now, there is one object store for the get, and there is only one app in it, which is called contacts. And if I click that, it will now load me all documents which are in there. And it will also pre-cache the first page of that. So we have a page of 15 documents in there, and those JSON is also cached within the index DB, and I can work with that. So if I'm now cutting my internet connection again to be like offline, so I'm not able to open a website because I'm offline mode, but I can still work on my contacts which are still there, and I can also open those contacts, and I can also switch into edit mode, and I can just edit some stuff, save that, and it will give me a toaster that it was unable to save, but it's stored locally. So we have now the background sync API, which you can see in the post in here as well. So we have one thing in here, and if I open that up, I have one open transfer which is pending, and the background sync API is checking every couple of minutes, whatever you set, if it has a connection or not, and if it has it, it will automatically get rid of that queue. But you can also, so I'm switching back to online mode, you can also enable that with that refresh button, and if I click that, I can see that the document it still have my demo in, and if I'm going back to the view, it's still there, and it's done offline, but synced back to my data within the demo NSF. And this is just a basic example of what's possible and what we use to build our web applications. And that's my short sneak peek into the open workspace. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer that via OpenNTF, via the chat, via Slack, whatever you want to have. Just contact me and I'm happy to help. And that's it with my demo.
Thanks, Andi. So Andi, your project, is it the UI framework as well as a framework for talking back to the Domino databases?
Yeah, basically it's a UI framework which you can use to build your own applications, which are talking back via DQL to Domino.
Well, that seems very comprehensive. That looks pretty cool, especially if you're looking at moving away from the Notes client into a JavaScript-based framework. This looks like it does a lot of the work for you, a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yep.
Yeah, that's very impressive. It really is.
It is.
Very nice.
That looks very cool.
Well, thanks. That's something definitely I think as a lot of developers are looking at moving applications off the Notes client, this looks like a good way to help avoid a lot of the work in the background that you'd have to do. All right, let me change. Let's go back to our questions. If you do have a lot of questions, I'll put back up the.
While you're going there, I'll ask Devin the next question that's up because we're pivoting into the questions from his presentation. So,
Cool.
enhanced log and open log, Devin, can you do a little compare and contrast between the two of those?
Oh yeah, I'd be happy to. OpenLog is an OpenNTF project written by Julian Robichaux. It is fantastic. There's no question about it. OpenLog is absolutely an amazing, amazing tool. And the truth is, when it comes down to deployments in the wild and people who are actually using logging tools from OpenNTF, OpenLog is hands down by far the clear winner. There are thousands of deployments of OpenLog for every single deployment of enhanced log. There's no question about it. The primary difference between them is OpenLog logs on a single document per logged event pattern. So in order to get a context of all of the events that you've logged within your session, you need to look at a view and you can see all of the logged events, okay? And that's how you do it. And then when you open that individual document for that single logged event, that's when you get all the meta information, all the extended information about it, about whatever that event was, be it an error, an exception, a problem, whatever. It's all in there. So it's a document per logged event pattern. Enhanced log is a single document per session pattern. Now, granted, if your session runs extremely long and you log way too much stuff, enhanced log will automatically generate a subsequent document so that you don't overrun the amount of information allowed to be stored in a rich text field, because it's just a rich text body field. So enhanced log uses, but that's a rarity when you overrun it. Enhanced log uses a single document per entire programmatic session. So when you open it, you have one set of meta information at the top, and then all of your logged events are in order going down the list or going down the document with timestamp. So when you look at logged events in an enhanced log view, the view will display individual sessions that have occurred, individual programs, one after another, and when they occurred and all the logs. In OpenLog, when you look in the view, you see all of the events kind of there. You can categorize them, group them based upon meta information in the document, but that's the primary difference between the two. And I love Julian's work. It's really, really good work. His is very well documented, and good product. It's a good product. I like mine better, but that's because, you know, it's my baby.
Awesome. Okay, I think you more or less answered the next question, but I'll ask it anyway. So is there a limit to how many rows you can log into a document?
You're limited by the amount of data that an NSF can hold.
Yes.
But
for a particular session, like you said, you'll kick over to a second document if you max out on the size of data that can go into a rich text field.
Yes, absolutely. I didn't demonstrate that, but I have that in there. Basically what happens is when you overrun a document, you come to the point where there's more data in a single document than is allowed. Suddenly the very last entry on that log document will say, it'll have a timestamp and it'll say, this log document exceeds maximum size. And there'll be a little doc link next to it. And you click that doc link and it opens the next log document for that session. And the very first line in the subsequent log document will say previous log document exceeds maximum size, and it'll have a link going back to the previous document. And then you can just kind of go down that document. And so you've got a link at the beginning and a link at the end, so you can kind of go through. So you could literally, you know, if you generate, you know, 1,000 log documents, it's a lot of logging, but the system will handle it. It'll be just fine. You won't overrun anything. So, and I added
Why do I
that.
get the feeling that, sorry, I was just gonna say, why do I get the feeling that when you built this, you worked an entire weekend without sleeping and just got in the groove and got going? That's a meticulous level of detail. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That is a feature that was added out of necessity, meaning I was doing some pretty extensive logging on some processes, and I was actually profiling some methods to figure out what's happening. And I was logging scheduled agents on a server that were running at 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, and they were processing, doing a lot of batch processing. And when I would, you know, come in the morning to look at my logs, there were just everything was corrupted. You couldn't open the log document because it exceeded too much information. So you had this single log document with a rich text field on it that was just massive. And I went, oh, I need to fix that so that I can read this, because you couldn't get it out. I couldn't get the data out. I'm like, this is pointless. I have to fix this. So yeah, cool. it was born out of need.
Okay, Howard, I'll pass back to you.
Okay, yeah, we have a question for Andi. Have you ever tried to integrate Vue.js with XPages?
No, not yet. And we don't want to. So we try to find for a different way, because XPages are session-based and sessions are not running offline. So that's why we decided to go with a new stack and bypass that.
Okay, thanks, Andi. Karsten, we got a bunch of questions for you. I'll give you the first one. Is there, do you have any options to use a mobile client with the task manager or a web browser front end?
You mean an integration with the mobile task management?
Well, just work with like an iPhone, Android type device, either via the browser.
It's working. No, it's not a browser-based application, so there's no web user interface. It's a classic legacy nodes application running in HCL Nomad on iOS and probably on Android devices, but I don't have any. And there's no integration with a client or the to-do management client on the device, because it's an isolated NSF. That's all you get in the Nomad client.
Okay, so it will work under Nomad or in the regular Nodes client.
Right.
Okay.
Next question is, Karsten, does the tool have a task or to-do app display in the Notes calendar? So do you do integration with the Notes calendar like the
Not yet, because it was more for my personal to-dos and what I want to do next, and I'm not that calendar-based actually, so that's not my personal workflow. My calendar is pretty much empty, and I know what what I need to work on for the current week. It's just more to have a place where I can write down some ideas and prioritize them, move them to the more important area, for example, and some things for the future, which I keep in quadrant number 4.
This is actually a good example of what Howard was talking about at the beginning of the webinar, where we have a project on OpenNTF, and there's a request for an enhancement, and if somebody thought that made sense to join that project and build that enhancement, this would be a great opportunity to jump in and join with Karsten and make the project more
yes,
open
would be
for other
great.
people too. Yeah.
I also got requests for web interface. So if anyone wants to jump in and create one, would be great.
Cool.
Right.
Another question on mobile. Are there screen notifications for your app?
No, you have to ask HCL if they can add something like that. Another thing that I don't really like about the HCL Nomad client is that there's no integration with the spell checker and the autocomplete feature for rich text and also for text areas. That's one thing that gets on my nerves every day, because I have some typos in my text and need to correct them. And typing in other applications is much easier. I already requested that at the right team and right persons. Not sure if that's easy to do, because the Nomad client is custom rendering. It's not a native client, and they have to fake some things to integrate it with the text areas and the logic and the spell checker logic of iOS. But I really need that, and I hope they will add it.
Okay. Karsten, is there where you have a due date in the TodoManager, and if it says not due soon, but then all of a sudden the date, as we get closer to the due date, will it automatically move quadrants, or do you have to kind of manually drag that into the next quadrant?
I'm currently doing that manually. I don't use for me, I don't use the due date in most cases. It's just to prioritize ideas and to decide what to work on next.
Again, another idea for somebody to jump in.
Yes, sure. There's no background agent, actually. That's just formula code and a few lines of Lotus script code that I added for this detection of the screen real estate.
It's a wonderful illustration of the power of the Lotus Notes client,
Right.
isn't it? Okay, next question. I think this question is for Andi. Ramazan, you may want to jump in and clarify, but I'll ask Andi, for your application, the question is, how is the domain of the application set?
The domain of the application,
I think this is more of the server that it's running on.
Yes, so basically what I demoed was on my local host, but we're using an Nginx proxy manager. So we have 2 public domains, which are then connecting to the Node web server in the backend. So basically that's up to someone by itself, whatever the domain should look like.
Maybe I'll jump in and do a shameless plug. So the Canadian user group, I was part of an effort to build the video series on how to use the app dev pack. And we actually do a little bit of that in the course, basically how to get the Vue application to talk to the Domino server using ports. So you might want to check that out. The course information is available at www.c3ug.ca.
And Graham, I actually took your series and got everything working. So learned a lot, and it was quite a interesting challenge to get all the IAM server and everything working.
Yeah. I guess that's really a heavy start, but once you get that done, it's really rock solid and working and easy to integrate with future developments. So as well, I used the same course to get started a year ago or so.
Okay, just as an aside, and maybe Graham, maybe you could, you might know this, or Roberta, you can jump in. Accessing the OpenNTF Slack channel, is there a link somewhere that we could put in the chat that explains how to do that?
Do we have that on our home page? Yeah, so if you go to, well, hold on a second, let me make sure before I.
OpenNTF.slack.com, it's simple as that.
Okay.
I'll type it in the chat.
And is there a process to get authenticated or to get access?
Hey, if you open up the OpenNTF site, there is a Slack icon on the right side, and if you click that, you will get right there.
Yep.
Okay, great. I think we just have one more question for Devin. I think the question is, does extended logging capture the Domino agent's activity? I think it captures whatever you code to capture, but maybe you can expand upon that.
Yeah, you have to, in your agent, you have to explicitly write lines of code to actually call the logging. So like say at the end of a method result, you wanted to log what the method result was, you would call the enhanced log method result line of code. Or if you wanted to just log action, or, pardon me.
Still there, Devin?
If you, sorry, yeah, I'm sorry. I had to hit mute because my son's dog went off. She's like a frickin' insano thing. So anyway, you have to explicitly call the logging type, the various log events from within your code. When you call that event, it captures the method from which you're calling it. And there's a couple of arguments so that you can include a class header so it knows which class you're calling from, or if you want to include a prefix for a library, you can include that. That's in the example code. You can see that in the example code. So you make the call to call that particular type of log, an action, an event, an exception, a warning, extended content, any of those types of things. Then the actual underlying logging object, that singleton object that I mentioned earlier, it checks your preferences that you've configured on the config document, or if you've used one of the methods to tell it to pull the information in from your notes INI file, it checks your log settings, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, etc., to determine what level of logging to log. And then based upon those preferences, it will either write the information that you've sent to the log, or it will dump it and it goes to data heaven and it doesn't get written anywhere. And that allows you to do things like put a lot of heavy logging code into your agent to do testing and diagnostics and debug, and then just with a click of a checkbox, stop it from writing that excessive information to the log and only write featured information or whatever information you want. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You have the ability to do it, but then when you're done with your testing, if you don't want to go back and clean all those logging statements out of your code, you don't have to. You can just disable logging for that method, or for that database, and you're done. And the config document configures the logging at a database level. So each database would have a single enhanced log config document.
Great, sounds pretty cool. All right, I think we're out of questions unless I miss one, Graham.
Nope, that's everything.
All right, well, thanks. Thank you, Graham, for co-hosting, and thanks to all our presenters. This is great. I know, David, you had a good suggestion that we have so many projects and maybe we just need a show and tell where we kind of keep it at a high level and go through a bunch of projects that, you know, would be of interest to a lot of people that they may not know about. So that might be a good webinar, or maybe even do that like once every couple of weeks. Just have an hour-long show and tell kind of thing. We'll have to talk about that. So thanks to everyone for attending today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.